the Through the Veil podcast. I'm Elle,
I'm Camille.
and
And I'm
today we
Kelly.
have Kelly, we have somebody very important. We have Kelly with us today. Kelly is a professional medium in Southern California. Um, she's been doing this for how many years, Kelly?
Professionally since 2018.
Many years now. And today she's going to share with us her story and how she got to be where she is.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, you guys. It's so fun to be on with you. And, kindred souls, kindred spirits, women who have the gift of spirit communication and also have the faith. So, so where do you want me to start? Just sort of as early as I can remember?
Yeah, like where did this manifest in your life? As,
Yeah.
When did
as a
you first
child,
So
as a
notice you had
teen?
this gift?
Yeah.
that's a really good question. Mavis Pattilla, who is has since transitioned to spirit. She used to mentor me, and she used to say that um, some mediums are born and some mediums are made. And what she meant by that is that the gift of spirit communication, the faculty within our souls, is existent within each and every one of us. But some of us come into this world already sort of wide open in terms of our ability to see and sense and feel and hear. And other people who come into their gift or their knowing around spirit communication is usually because of some sort of traumatic event, as I know that you guys know. Sometimes it's the loss of somebody really close to them. Other times it's a near-death experience or a traumatic car accident or something like that. And something happens where they start to unfold. For me, my earliest memories are of perceiving the other side, if we want to call it that, the spirit people in heaven and spirit world. I use them interchangeably just
Hmm.
for the purposes of this conversation. So, um, my very earliest memory that I can recall and tell in a story was around the age of 6, and this is what we would refer to more as a psychic knowing, a soul to soul understanding. And it was with my grandmother. I've always had a really, really connected bond with my mom's mother. And as I find, and I don't know if you guys find the same, I would imagine so. We tend to see that the ability or the gift of spirit communication can be stronger in family lines.
Right.
Yeah.
A
So
lot of time with the women in family lines.
the
Though I
women,
did come
yeah.
across a man once and I was like, wow, that's unusual. Good for you.
Yes, it is, and it's really interesting. It tends to be, grandmother to mother to daughter to,
Right.
and down the line. But I do find that if the gift is somewhere in the family, it often sits sort of dormant in the men, more
Right.
dormant in men than in women. Maybe that's cultural or whatever. But in any case, so my story takes place in Colorado. I was living in Littleton, which is where I was born and raised until I was 9, and then we moved to Texas. And I believe I was sleeping. The memory's a little murky there, but what I remember really clearly is sitting up and just starting to cry, just cry and cry. And my mom came running in the room and she said, "What's wrong? What's going on?" And I didn't know in the moment why I was crying until she asked me what was wrong. And I just blurted out, "Grandma, something's wrong with grandma." And she said, "Oh no, honey, they're on an Alaskan cruise. All is well. They just called from port today. They're happy. They're having so much fun. They're bringing home halibut." Like, I don't know what she said, but it was somewhere along the lines of, "It's fine." And I said, "No, it's not." It was like just this knowing, like a pit in my stomach. Something wasn't okay. And as it turns out, they flew back into Denver when they got back from their cruise, and we went to pick them up. And off comes my grandmother, and she's in a cast from all the way from the hip to her ankle. And there's a time change, obviously, between Colorado and Alaska. And what had happened is, as she was disembarking, or maybe she was embarking, one or the other, when she was getting on or off the boat, she fell and completely shattered her leg. And we actually traced the moment that I woke up crying to the moment that she fell, and they were identical. So it's that link, it's that knowing. And I didn't know enough. I wasn't clear enough to say she's hurt her leg, she's going to be okay. That came with development later, has
Right.
come with development through the
It was
years.
instinct at that point. Just
Yeah,
instinct.
just instinct. And then for until she passed, which was only about a year ago at the age of 99, through our entire lives, we just had this really beautiful, soul psychic connection. And she was a very strong Christian, beautifully strong Christian German woman, lived through World War II.
Wow.
I've never seen a faith like I witnessed in her, just the joy of the spirit always flowing out of her, no matter what she'd lived through, and she'd had a hard life. And she once pulled me aside and she said, I have to tell you something I can't tell anybody else. And I said, what is it? And she said, I see people. And I said, okay. She said, no, I see people who have gone to heaven and they come visit me and they talk with me just like you and I are talking. And she said, but you have to keep my secret. You can't tell anybody because they'll think I'm crazy. And so she carried this gift with her through her entire life, but she was never able to share it. So I feel like it's a little bit sad, but I am blessed that she was able to share it with me. And as you all know, you often can witness and recognize that gift within other people.
Right.
There's something about their aura, their eyes, like there's just something that says, okay, I see you. And I think she saw that in me. And so that was the reason why she shared that.
Wow.
Yeah. So would you say that she was probably the strongest influence then in your faith basis growing up? I mean, that sounds like she was a spiritual pillar, like
Oh my
that
gosh.
kind of faith.
Yes. She absolutely was. She was just the embodiment of Christ consciousness, and and just that love. Pure love is what she was. And I would say yes, only because, well, yes, partially because she then raised, of course, my mom and my mom's two brothers, in the faith, and for them it was Lutheran, and then my mom converted to Catholicism, but the core was there, you know.
Right.
But then my dad's mother was also very, very strong in her faith as a Catholic, so it kind of came in from both sides.
Wow.
Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you feel, this might be jumping ahead, but do you feel like it's more acceptable today now to have a really firm Christian background and to still practice spiritual gifts like these?
More acceptable than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Good answer.
absolutely. Yes, absolutely, I do. And I think it's in large part, I mean, some of the work has been done in decades past, well, probably in centuries past, but it's in large part the work that you all are doing, with this podcast, with even your one-to-one private sessions, because I know, I would assume if you're anything like me, you have people who come in and they say, I'm a Christian, or I'm part of this religious faith base, and we don't do this. We don't believe in
Right.
this.
Yeah.
But I'm so desperate for connection and for some peace that I'm open to trying it. And then what happens at the end is there's so much love and so much peace and so many golden threads of connection that they can't deny, that they leave thinking, oh, that's totally different than I grew up, being taught
Right.
it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a
I
good
always
question. And
like,
I always go ahead.
I always like say, come and see. Well, come and see before you make a judgment. It's a
Yeah.
tool just like anything else. And there maybe are people that don't practice it both board, like in the best way.
Right.
There totally
Right.
are, and that's the
There definitely
problem.
are.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like when practiced, and I think the way that it is meant to be practiced, this gift can do nothing but connect you to God, connect you to the other side. That's what it's about. It's about that kind of connection on a deep spiritual level, which is what we are. We're spiritual beings.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And I believe that when you're utilizing this gift for the public, that there's such a high level of ethical conduct that has to be
Yes,
abided by.
we love this
It's
topic.
it's
We do.
so it's like you're holding, these people in the palm of your hand, and what is probably the most vulnerable time of their life. So
Right.
it has to be of the highest level. No, I'm going to reference Mavis a lot in this conversation because she was such a a trailblazer and somebody who held God at the center of her world and also shared her gift of spirit communication. I think because she had God in the center, spirit communication was so good for her. She used to say, someday I'm going to, she was English. I can't do really very good English accent, so I'll just say it in my American accent. But she said, someday I'm going to have to go to the other side. And I don't want a line of people angry with me with, you know, with their pitchforks saying, you said I said this, but I didn't actually say that, you know? So she said, I have a vested interest in making sure that I'm getting this right for the
Mhm.
spirit people. But the other
It's a
thing that
good point.
she,
Like
yeah,
the anxiety that comes with doing this work, it's like you're representing them and you have to do a really good job
yeah,
because there's nobody else who can contradict what you're saying, really. So like make
100%.
sure.
Yeah, and I would assume that there's some conversation to be had if you really got sloppy, you know, maybe
Yeah.
you were tired or whatever, and you know, you go over there someday and they're like, "Listen, we've got to sit down and talk because that just really you really got it wrong for me."
You
Um,
misrepresented me.
yeah. But I want to go back to your question. I think you asked it, Camille. Um, you know, Mavis was a medium 50, 60 years ago. And her story is actually really fascinating because she was a factory worker. She grew up Methodist in England. Um, and she just had a very ordinary life. She had gotten divorced and remarried, and she had a young son, and she was diagnosed with terminal cancer in her 30s. And she was feeling unwell, as you would with cancer. And she was sitting home and she was very angry with God. She was yelling at him, "This isn't fair. How could you do this? I have a new husband. And I want to live. I want to be here. I want to live this life. And this isn't fair. What have I done?" And in that moment, she says, a man materialized in her living room, a spirit person. He showed, he showed up behind her TV, which at the time you can imagine was probably like
Yeah.
a big boxy set. And she never said she was afraid, but he stood there and he started walking towards her and he said, "Mavis, you should find a spiritual healer very soon or you'll die before the New Year's bell." And at the time, it was about 3 months that she'd had then to live. And so she called her new husband and she said, "Oh, I'm really bad now. I'm really going to die." And he said, "Why are you saying that?" She said, "Because I'm seeing people. I'm seeing things. I'm hallucinating." And so, you know, they kind of started to get in motion, assuming she was going to pass. And she had told her husband, "This is what happened. This I saw this man. He told me I was going to die before the New Year bell. I need to find a spiritual healer." She didn't know what a spiritual healer was. And so her husband was talking with his coworker at work, and you know, his coworker was saying, "How's Mavis?" And he said, "Oh, she's not well. She's seeing people. Like she's hallucinating. So we think the time is drawing near." And the coworker said, "Well, what'd she say? What'd the person say?" And he said, "The person said that she needs to seek a spiritual healer or she'll pass before the New Year bell." And the coworker says, "Well, I'm a spiritual healer. Bring her to me." And the rest is history, really, because she lived into her 80s. She healed miraculously through that spiritual healer, and then she couldn't turn it off. Everywhere she looked, there were people, spirit people. That's a whole different story. But I'm going to fast forward to 2018 when I was driving her around San Diego. She came out for a course and demonstration, and then I was showing her around the city. She was sitting right behind me, and she said, "You know, it used to be really, really hard to do this work as a medium in spirit communication." She would go into spiritualist churches in England and do demonstrations. And she said, on the way in, there would be ladies lined up on the side of the sidewalk, like a tunnel, you know, of women. And they would have their Bibles over their head and they would hit her on the head as she was walking into the church. And I just thought, you know, we go through, you guys have been through this too, I know in your own way. We go through trials and tribulations and modern day pitchforks, you know, that with people chasing after us. But we're not getting hit over the head with Bibles, you know, anymore. So I do believe, very
Right.
long answer to your question, it is easier.
Yeah, I mean, we're I mean, people maybe in a Facebook setting could say something like that, and the Bible, or you're deceived, but like we're not physically actually getting touched by them. It's just like a keyboard warrior, living
Yeah.
and maybe on a different continent. Yeah, that's
I mean,
crazy.
we do interact with it in our own faith practices, in our own congregations, in our own church buildings.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't know. Maybe maybe we're just not on the level of Mavis. Like people don't feel like they have to put up that much resistance, but um people just have, they have preconceived notions about what this is and what this isn't. And I think particularly in the Bible, there are, I mean, this is the gospel according to Elle. Just
Love
like
it.
today, there are highly educated people, highly spiritual people in the world. People, pastors we believe in, or preachers, or people that just seem very connected. But we all have our own biases and we all have our own influences.
Yeah.
And there were, Peter and Paul and John, they all had their own influences and biases as well. And even inspired, sometimes we don't see the whole bigger picture yet, or we have to give a word of caution because the tone of the time may be too dangerous to, pursue something that would be more applicable later, right?
Right.
That's a huge, that happens all throughout history. Like there were points in Christianity early on where it was really dangerous for Christians to practice in public. And so they had to practice in secret. But that doesn't mean Christianity was wrong. It doesn't mean that it needed to stop. It just meant proceed with caution. And I think with this thing too, there's a lot of scriptures that are frequently misinterpreted in the Bible as meaning like, this is satanic, this is of the devil, when really you have to take into account who was writing it and why were they writing it? In what context were they writing it? Because there's just as much contrary. Jesus was communicating with spirits all the time. And let's talk about Acts. Let's talk about all the
Yep.
crazy stuff that happened in that, right? Where totally an outpouring of the spirit and yeah, words, spiritual manifestations that occurred. And those were totally fine, given the right context.
Yeah.
And I think
Right.
that this is exactly the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so vital to have connection with other people like you all who understand that there's room for both.
Right.
There's room for your spiritual, for your faith, your religious beliefs, and the Bible to be true. And there's also room for spirit communication.
Right.
There's room for both.
It's just another manifestation of God's power. In my opinion.
1,000%. I wish I could scream that from the rooftop. So I love that you
Yeah.
just said that. Yeah.
So Mavis Pattilla, she's kind of like she's a godmother in mediumship. Like she did a
Godmother.
lot for the work, right? You have these big giants of people that came through and moved things forward. And to give a little bit of context for our American-based listeners, spiritualism in Great Britain is huge. It's like a movement. They've been practicing this for a very, very long time. They have whole churches that are Christian centered, but their worship base is practiced through spiritual communication. And oftentimes people will come into these areas, these arenas to develop and to practice these gifts. And they will do demonstrations, which are basically spirit communication from a platform, from a stage. We would call it entertainment in America, but they call it worship there. So she was involved in spiritualism. That was her core of training, correct? And she's a very huge name. I have all the respect in the world for her and what she did, and bring not attention, but like understanding, I think, to people. She was one of those early figures, like in the 80s and the 70s and the 90s that
Yeah.
moved people through this, right? How did you come in contact with Mavis in your story? How did you meet her?
Well, there's the 3D story, and then there's you know, the
Right.
the divine intervention story. But
Both are important.
both are important. I remember, I think it must have been 2017. I was just doing house chores and I was absorbing everything that I could find about spirit communication, mediumship, but I was feeling ungrounded because everybody that I found to listen to left God out of the conversation.
Right.
And at the time, I was feeling like I need to be rooted and safe in the in the um, in the understanding that God's at the core of all of this. This is inspired healing. And Mavis brought the Father, God, into the conversation. And so I just fell into her podcasts or her YouTubes, everything that I could find. I was just, soaking it up like a sponge. And I remember, that question when you're younger, if you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be? And of course, growing up is always Jesus, and
Always the
also
right
that would
answer.
still be awesome. I'm not saying it wouldn't be great, but in that moment of my life, my thought was, if I could sit with anybody right now and just absorb all of their knowledge and wisdom, it would be Mavis Pattilla. Of course, she was in England and I was here, but somehow that my prayer was answered, because I ended up getting connected with a beautiful woman friend medium named Allison Gannon. And she at the time was doing a lot of coordination and organization for Mavis and on stateside and some in England as well. And Allison and I started to get to know each other, and I was taking some of Allison's courses. And then, so then I was made aware of when Mavis was coming to teach. So I took a course with her in Long Beach for several days. And this was back in 2018. And at the end of the course, she came up to a friend of mine, fellow medium, and myself, and she said, I understand you all live in San Diego. And we said, yeah. She said, I'm doing a demonstration there for the public. And I would like to know if you would like to come join me and demonstrate with me as my colleagues. If I could have passed out in that moment, I absolutely would have. Thank goodness my friend she's like she's like a big sister to me. I call her my work wife too, because, we do a lot of communicating about the work that we do. And she just said yes, like it just came out of her mouth. And like she said yes for both of us. My legs kind of went. I had never demonstrated in front of any kind
Right.
of public unless it was a class. And I was like, oh my gosh, the first time I'm demonstrating is alongside Mavis Pattilla. So that was the start of it. And I remember right before the demonstration, I kind of came up to her. I was like hiding in the bathroom. And I said, can you support me in my contact if it's not strong enough, or I'm not, I'm not really getting it? And she looked at me and she said, no. She said, tonight you're my colleague. You're not my student. And I thought, oh my gosh. So anyway, there's nothing like, just sort of getting thrown into the water and you sink or you swim. And, every demonstration is different. Some are beautifully, accurate all the way through. And it just feels like, all the conditions are right. And some you leave thinking, boy, that was just really terrible. I just didn't do a very good job for the spirit world at all. And you never really know, but that was the start of it. And then we got to take her around San Diego. And then I continued to mentor under her, actually right up until she passed.
Wow.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I would imagine that you continue to mentor under her.
You know what? It's so funny you say that, Camille, because I had an experience with her last week. And what I'm still kind of integrating the experience, but was interesting, and you guys might find this interesting in your work. Mavis was really focused on the evidential work, the evidential medium, bringing through the evidence, that really proves. She said, it's not our job to prove, but it is the evidence that is the foundation of belief a lot of times for people. And what she said to me is, we're working out of evidence now. We're now moving into essence, and that should be the focus. So I think she and Gordon Higginson and a lot of other people are doing a lot of work from the other side to kind of evolve mediumship to where it needs to be, or spirit communication to where it needs to be today in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
So how do you interpret that essence versus evidence? Because they, in a sense, laid the groundwork for that. They set people
Yeah.
are familiar with what a medium is and what a medium does to some
Yeah.
extent, most people. How do you interpret what that movement looks like, that shift?
So I look back to the origins of spiritualism, and there was in the original spiritualist gatherings and churches, they really focused on physical mediumship. It
Right.
was the manifestation, so that there was a
Do you want to
shared experience.
define what that is a little
Yes.
bit for our listeners?
So physical mediumship is where there's a shared experience of objective seeing, objective clairvoyance. So everybody in the room experiences seeing a spirit person in front of them. So actually would manifest in the circle. There might be a disembodied voice that comes through that everybody can hear, the voice of your mom who's passed to spirit. For example, there might be a port, and a port is something that shows up out of basically thin air,
Like
nowhere,
an object or
an
an
object.
image? Yeah.
Yes. And I think that there must have been a lot of confusion at the time with what was biblically, you know, not okay, and what was happening in physical mediumship, because it would get. I'm sure that the lines got pretty blurred there. But they needed that at the time for people to believe that this was possible. There
Right.
wasn't they needed the solid evidence. So that was the physical mediumship. Then we moved into to mental mediumship, and that's what we do largely now. But
Right.
mental mediumship is based on the evidence. So I know that your father in spirit is here because he shows me that you still keep his journal in that top drawer of your bedside table. And so that's the evidence. So that's really where we've been, I would say. I'm going to just guess, but for the last 50, 60 years. And um and now we're headed, which feels so beautiful, is really trying to work through getting rid of that prove it energy, because it's a lot of stress, I think, on the medium, on the person doing the spirit communication, to really prove it, like this is the one chance. But what if we moved that prove it energy out of the way and we just became that really clear connection that
Mhm.
allowed the essence, so the person, instead of proving it, just felt their loved one again.
Right.
Yeah, that's important. I was doing a session with somebody and we were having a beautiful connection with her parents on the other side. And I was describing what they looked like, and there was enough evidence that she was confident this is my mom and dad. And we're getting messages and she's just enjoying it. And then randomly she says, okay, I want you to ask my mom what was the name of that doll that I really wanted when I was 6 years old. Ask her for the exact name. I want to hear you tell me. And I'm thinking, why are we going from messaging to the name of this doll? Like, you know that she knows. Why is it so important that I know? Like, why do we have
Yeah.
to prove again, And so I'm just like, she's showing me you playing with dolls, because I'd already brought that up as evidence, like, kind of playing kitchen and playing toys with the dolls and stuff. And then I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not getting the specifics. And then later in the conversation, the mom was kind of going, she's saying the P sound out to me. And I said, either her name has a putt in it, or maybe we're going back to that doll. And it was a Snoopy. It wasn't even a doll. It was actually a Snoopy like figurine, like a little Snoopy stuffed toy. And I was, gosh, I'm like, that doesn't really matter. I mean, I think that this conversation was so exciting before we were
It
worried about
is the
proving.
evidence. Yeah.
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 I think
Yeah.
the biggest compliment that I could ever get after a reading or a session is when they go, like, I felt them here, like they were here with me again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's when you know that you've been really successful. That's when you know that because when you're just giving them rattling off a list of evidential mediumship, evidential validations. Yes, it proves that they're there, but it doesn't hit you in the heart. Like it doesn't go into your heart space. It remains mental, right? And so it's just kind of suspending the suspicion or the disbelief that you had, but it's not actually creating a connection. And ultimately, I think in its purest, most essential format, that's what this gift is for. It's for connection. And when that connection actually occurs between you and the spirit world, between you and the client, and then the client and the spirit world, that's magic. It's a miracle, right? And I think it parallels, like you were talking about, the development of, I think we came from like a really industrial, scientific based background as a society, right? And we
Yeah,
kind of progressed. We still have that scientific rationalism in the back of our mind, which is why that validation is
totally.
maybe still important. But it kind of also parallels the trajectory of humanity and the trajectory of faith, as a faith community or anything where it's like, first you have to get baby faith. First you have to get to the point where you want to see the evidence, you want to see it working in your life. But when you actually make that connection with God, when you actually make that connection where you build that knowing within yourself, something completely different occurs. It means something. It grows something. It changes something. And that is kind of what this spirit communication, I think, is getting to with this essence, where it's creating something, it's changing something within both you and within your client. And that, when that happens, is just, it's undescribable. It's healing, it's moving, it's like earth shaking, it's changing in so many beautiful, beautiful ways. I love that she brought that up for you.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
amazing. I think it also plays into like that concept people say like, well, how come I'm not having dreams where my mom's coming to me? I've seen my aunt and I've seen my grandma, but my mom and I were close. Why isn't my mom showing up to me? But then they say, but I have experiences where I feel her. And as I'm doing the session, I'm like, your mom is indicating she wants you to expand that ability for you to communicate. Like she's purposefully showing up to you more with feelings than visual because she wants you to develop that. And those impressions and those feelings can burn into your souls more deeply than a visual can.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, and I love what you said, Elle, about one of the best compliments you can get is that people feel like they were with their loved ones.
Yeah.
Um, one other mentor I worked with for a long time, Andy Bing, he said that that's the mark of a true medium is when you can feel the essence of the spirit person
Right.
there.
Mm.
I would add that one of the best compliments that I have gotten, and just actually recently got this week, was somebody who emailed me and she said, "You made me want to live."
Mm.
That's wonderful.
And I think what she was saying is, I didn't want to live in a world where my husband wasn't anymore.
Mm.
But the
Right.
fact that I now know with every fiber of my being that he's still here with me allows me to have the desire to want to live.
Right.
And that was the gift he gave her. I can't take credit for it, but what a beautiful, it's a nudge along the path that just says, okay, you can hit me over the head with Bibles. You can beat me to a pulp with your Bible, but I'm going to still do this work
Yeah.
because it's
Right.
it's purposeful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's how Christ worked too. He worked one by one. He
that's
worked
right.
with the individual, with individual conversion before he worked with the crowd. And it was by individual conversion that Christianity happened.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a beautiful, beautiful illustration.
I'm just so moved, you guys. I'm so moved by Kelly say, because it's very reassuring to hear you say, because you've been doing this for the past, 6 years, to say that that was a nudge for you, because I just got started doing this in the past year and few months. And I get nudges all the time. I had one last week that I could even get emotional about because I'm on my period right now. So everything's extra emotional. But I did a session with somebody and she felt drawn. I made a post in this Facebook group that I advertise in, and she saw it on a day that she was feeling really low from her son's passing. And she reached out to me because she felt like she was supposed to. And I hear that a lot. Like I felt nudged. And we have like parallel stories. She lost her son around the similar age I lost my son. Her ability to communicate through the veil has been so enhanced because of her son's passing, and she feels like he's inviting her to learn and do more. Um, and she's actually going to be doing Elle's course coming up. Like we were supposed to meet because she was supposed to do this course, and I'm like soul sister right there. And it was uplifting for both of us. And it was just, I was supposed to be like that person to help her along her path, like, and to validate, yes, your son is telling you to go down this path. This is right for you. It was so beautiful. And it was just like God's nudge is saying, you're doing the right work, Camille, keep doing it. I put you here for a reason. It's so
What
emotional.
greater
It's
what
beautiful.
greater witness is there than when that
Yeah.
happens? When you can see the movement in the path and you're like,
Oh,
thanks God, give me another one.
yeah. Why I'm here, I
Yeah,
guess. They're just, it's unconventional. But I always, I think that I'm kind of have that daredevil in me, and I'm a risk taker. And I think that if God wanted to keep my life interesting, like, why not put me on this path? Sure, I'll do it.
It definitely keeps things interesting, doesn't it?
It really
I have
does.
found
Good word for it.
more more mamas than any other group who've lost their babies in the
Mm,
physical world come into their gift.
mm,
And I had one mom say, look, I was atheist. I didn't, I didn't believe in anything. And she said, and then I lost my Michael and I had to find Michael. I
yeah.
had to know where he
Right.
was.
Hmm.
And so she developed her gift. And so many bereaved parents that I work with are actually really amazing mediums. Um,
Right.
because that desire was so strong. They had to find their babies,
The
you know,
connection remains. Like death cannot
absolutely.
separate. Love
Yeah.
Yeah.
is unconquerable. Like it's kind of trite to say it, but it really is a universal law.
Yeah. I don't usually get emotional like this, but
Beautiful.
um, it's so beautiful. And like it was my son's purpose. It was his time to pass. We've had many, many assurances of that and confirmations of that. And if that was his plan, and my plan with him is to kind of go on this spiritual journey. If he had to go anyway, like, what a privilege, right? We're coming up on 6 years on his death anniversary. It's in a couple of weeks. And so things just get a little bit more tender this time of year. And there's, for all the tragedy that it's been, the traumatic experience, he passed unexpectedly in an incident. But for all of that, there's been so much beauty and so many amazing experiences. I feel like it's a roller coaster. I mean, I'm here for the ride. And, God's put me on this path that I wasn't expecting. And it's been incredible.
Oh,
I'm
it's
sure
so
you can,
beautiful that you use your gift to help others.
Thank you.
I'm sure you can witness this too, Camille, but and Kelly, that there are no accidents. Like there are no God's plan is all encompassing. And when you take a step back and really look at it, you will see the pieces line up and the dominoes line up through blessing and through tragedy. Like we talk about this a lot on this podcast, Kelly, with like grief is something where we're not going to minimize or discount that it is one of the biggest trials and struggles that we'll move through probably in this life. But even within that grief, there are witnesses of the working of God. And nothing is by accident, nothing is by mistake. And it was through your son's life, Camille, that you were affected by this and you were moved on a path that also is serving your purpose, a purpose to help others, to help bring them to that truth and to light and to love and to connection. And all of that is connected. All loss is connected to growth. And all of that is also connected to blessing. Like
Mm-hmm.
all of these things, it's a bigger picture that we can take a step back and notice and look at. Like the hand of God is so apparent in all of it. And I think that is the tender mercy behind pain, behind grief, is there's a reason and it means something. It's sanctified. It's not useless. It's not wasted. And that I have seen that. Have been a witness to that doing this work so much more, I think, than maybe your average person. I have such a strong belief, such a strong testimony in that it's like I would scream that from the rooftops. I'm like, I'm like, just wait. The beauty is on the other side. Like there's a reason, there's a purpose, even through death. There's a purpose to everything.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because it's interesting that when he passed, I wanted to understand his experience. Like, it was the worst day of my life. What was his experience like? And the veil was kind of opened up for me in a moment, and I could feel like where there's darkness, maybe here there's light there, there's loss here, there's life there. So I was kind of, my brain was like, what's the truth? Like, what else is there for me to understand about this experience? What is his experience like? There's so much to understand and learn. It's incredible.
Right.
Yeah, it's so amazing to learn about what it is like over there. What are they doing? What does it feel like? And it's always such and mostly it's the parents that come to me that say, what are they doing? What's
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
like? how are they? Are they okay? You know, and I always know the answer to are they okay is absolutely yes. They cannot be separate from better than okay. But I
Right.
always like to ask each individual person, you know, are you okay? What are you doing? What's going on? I had a really cool experience. If we have a moment for a short story,
Yes, please.
um, it's a woman I work with. Bless her. I don't know how she survived this life, but she has such a strong spirit, and she finds a way to fill her cup with joy. But she's lost both her sons, and I met her after she lost her first son, and I believe that was the son who this story is about. But here's where I'm going. We did the session. So many beautiful messages, evidence, everything came through. And then she said, but what is he doing? What is he up to? You know? And I asked him, and he said, I'm the angel that helps to protect people on the side of the road when they've broken down so that they don't get hit from other cars. And I was like, oh, okay. You guys know what this is like, but for people who listening who may not do this work actively, they may not understand. Sometimes the spirit people will give us something to say that you're like, I'm not saying that. That sounds Looney Tunes. So I told her, because he was like, yeah, just tell her, she'll understand it. And I said, he says that he's the angel that protects people when they break down on the side of the road. And she just started crying. And I was like, does that mean something to you? And she said, yes. Because actually her son had died of a drug overdose. But a couple of years before his actual passing, he had broken down with his motorcycle on a blind curve. And he, the way that he told her the story, he should have been hit and killed while he was trying to get his bike back in working order. But he said, Mom, something protected me. Something sheltered me and kept me from getting hit on the side of that road that day. And so she said, it makes total sense that then he would be in that role.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what he was doing at the moment. I don't know what he's doing now, but it was really fascinating to see that, you know, sometimes they do have a role here.
That's so
Right.
cool. I actually have a friend. We were on this girls' trip last October, and she shared a story with she's broken down on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. I don't think, no, she has a cell. It was before cell phones. And this guy just shows up out of nowhere with a jack and he's like fixing her car. And she's like, I don't know where he came from. And then then I turned around and he's gone. She's like, he was an angel on the side of the road. And
I love it. Was he wearing like a lumberjack jacket? Because I always hear that they're in this plaid.
I'm gonna have to find out now. I'm gonna text her and say, what was he wearing?
Like
She's
the
gonna think
uniform.
that's so random. Why are you asking me this 10 months later?
That's funny.
But I think it's interesting because I think on the other side, I feel that they have free will, just like we do here. They get to kind of choose a job that's interesting to them. I did a session for a mother whose son passed from, it was a drug overdose, and he wanted to be on there to help receive spirits coming through that passed from a drug overdose to help them transition.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, my brother-in-law has often come through. He was a suicide and he often comes through, not just to me, but like to people. Like people that know my mother-in-law, people that don't, like people will tell her all the time, like they came close to the edge. They came close to making that choice. And there was Joe. He was right there and he was like, don't do it. You know, sometimes they literally see him sitting in the passenger seat of the car. And it's like, yeah, he's totally engaged in that work.
That's
It's
amazing.
amazing.
I love it.
Yeah.
I have goosebumps. You know how I talk about this all day, every day for the last, 20 years of my life, and it still gives me goosebumps.
Right. Still a
Amazing.
miracle every time.
Every time.
Best job, worst job.
There's something I want to touch on. I think you said it, Camille, that they're living another life, in heaven and in spirit. And I think that's a really key thing to just touch on quickly, is that they are living. We're not talking to the dead. We're talking to the living. And that's our promise, that we continue on, that we're eternal beings. And, I think it's important because my kids go to a Christian school, and we've run up against a lot of resistance there. And I think I've shared a lot of this with you, Al, but, and some kids confronted one of my daughters is in second grade, and there were 3 little girls that came up to her and they kind of cornered her and they said, your mom's a witch. She talks to dead people. And I just feel so sad for her that she had to be kind of, in that position. But it's fundamentally incorrect. I mean, obviously I'm not a witch, but also we're not talking to dead people. We're talking to the living, and the Bible does speak out against talking to the dead. It's a different thing, and I think that it's important to make that differentiation, because we joke that we talk to dead people, and and it's but that's not actually the case, and you all know that, but I think it's important to share.
Oh, that's a
That's
cool
a
distinction.
really
I've
good
never thought of it that
distinction.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have had plenty of experiences with spirits that maybe I would classify as the dead that are not the type that we're going to seek out to engage
Mm,
with. But it is
right.
a completely different experience to speak with the living on the other side. And you
Hmm.
can feel that when you breach that wall of communication, you can feel that. And just like you're quoting Andy being saying, like, once that happens, once they feel that communication too, you can't deny it. It's living energy. It's real. It's a real spirit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's been amazing, Kelly. Thank you for sharing your time with us and all of your experience. Where can
Oh,
people find
sure.
you, Kelly?
Yeah.
So it's really funny because I go by SoCal Medium. That's my website, socalmedium.com. But we're actually just coming up into a big life transition. We're going to move our family to Indonesia, to Bali, for a year at least, and
Wow.
have a new experience. Yeah. So I will no longer be in SoCal, but I'm still going to be doing the work via Zoom and phone and whatever else. So, and if you're in Bali, come see me. We can do it in
Okay,
person.
Yes.
Kelly,
Excuse to go.
we're having another guest on our podcast named Kelly King, and she spent a year living in Bali with her family.
Oh my gosh, really?
I need to introduce you
So
guys.
wild. I would love to meet the other Kelly. Yes.
Well, I've met her
Synchronicities everywhere.
virtually. Maybe it's so crazy.
Isn't that wild? I know, synchronicities. So,
Right.
so yeah, still SoCal Medium, but will not be actually physically located in SoCal. And if you run into no availability, it doesn't mean I'm not doing it anymore. I'm just trying to get the hours adjusted so that I can,
Right.
feel confident about showing up at the right time for the Zoom
Maybe
session.
6 a.m. is too early to connect. I mean, it would be for me.
Yeah,
You
it might
might
be.
you
I
might
don't
be
know.
operating as a nighttime medium now instead of daytime.
Yeah, maybe I'll change it from SoCal Medium to nighttime medium.
Working nights.
We'll figure it out.
Right.
Thank you guys so much for taking the
Yeah.
time, for having me on, and just for being sisters in this journey, because it is that just having that support and that love, and people to be able to call and say, what do you think about this? Given the context of your faith, what do you think about this? So that we can keep carrying the torch forward and help to blaze, the trail that Mavis started, and James Van Prague
Right.
and all of those other people years and years ago, to really bring this miracle more and more into focus and into the world, and less into judgment.
Yeah.
Right. Beautifully said. I love that.
Yeah.
As always, you can find Camille and I here on all of our podcast platforms. You can also contact us through our webpage,
Throughtheveilepodcast.com.
which is linked up to all of our different platforms, our Facebook, our social media. Feel free to reach out, send us an email if you have a story you want to share, if you would like to get in contact for a session, or you would like to join our community. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you. Thanks, Kelly. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, guys.